Guys, welcome back to Lab Cyber, and boy, do we have a crazy update to the NPD data breach. Now, just in case you're not aware of this particular story, let me give you a very quick recap. So, in the United States, there is a particular database run by the NPD, which is the National Public Data. This database is used by companies, organizations, and even individuals to run background checks. So say, for example, if you wanted to apply for a job in a particular company in the US, that company could use this database to run a background check on you. So they could check to make sure that you don't have any criminal records or anything like that. And as you can imagine, if this database can run background checks, the kind of information that is stored in that database is going to be very sensitive. So information like the first name, last name, physical addresses, email addresses, and perhaps most importantly, the social security numbers of hundreds of millions of Americans were stored in this particular database. Now, it was hacked initially back in April of this year, but it wasn't until last week that the NPD finally acknowledged that they had been hacked and also gave us more information about the kinds of data that may have been breached. And in fact, it turns out that this breach may be the biggest ever. It's been reported that over 2.9 billion records were exposed. That's still relatively unconfirmed at this point, but nevertheless, it's still one of the biggest data breaches ever. Now, the shocking update which I wanted to provide for you is from our Krebs Security. I'm going to bring in my web browser in here just to aid me in providing you with this information. And just in case you're not following Krebs Security, you definitely should. He's probably the number one investigative journalist for cybercrime on the internet, so be sure to give him a follow. So right now, the headline in his article says that the National Public Data published its own passwords. So new details are emerging about a breach at the NPD, a consumer data broker that recently spilled hundreds of millions of Americans' social security numbers, addresses, and phone numbers online. So Krebs Security has learned that another NPD data broker, which shares access to the same consumer records, inadvertently published the passwords to its back-end database in a file that was fully available from its homepage until today. So this is where things get very interesting. So following last week's story on the breadth of the NPD breach, a reader alerted Krebs Security that a sister NPD property, the background search service provider recordscheck.net. So recordscheck.net, they basically work with the NPD to run background checks on individuals. So apparently this particular sister site was hosting an archive that included the usernames and passwords for the site's administrator. So a review of this archive, which was available from the Records Check website until just before publication this morning, shows that it included the source code and plain text usernames and passwords for different components of recordscheck.net, which is visually similar to nationalpublicsdata.com and features identical login pages. It's kind of astonishing how in the year 2024, passwords are still stored in plain text. It's crazy. It is mind-boggling. And to think that a website as very important as this recordscheck.net, these guys stored passwords in plain text. It gets even worse. So apparently the exposed archive containing all these passwords in plain text, it was named members.zip, indicates that RecordsCheck users were all initially assigned the same 6-character password and instructed to change it, but many did not. Now, I'm pretty sure you must have seen something like this before on the internet where you create an account or you try to create an account on a website or a platform, and then that platform will send you a password, a temporary password with which you can use to log in for the very first time. But in the email with the password, they will say something like, oh, this is going to be a temporary password. We recommend that you change this password to something that you would want to use as your own password, right? Unfortunately, the thing is, most people will never take the time to actually change the default password because for them, they don't care. No one's going to hack me. That's the general mindset. So it's kind of a big L on the part of recordscheck.net that they did not make sure that the users actually used strong passwords. sometimes as a platform or as a website, you need to take the initiative and make sure that your users are actually using strong passwords. All this temporary password thing doesn't work. Let the users create accounts, and while they're creating their accounts, make sure that you have like a password strength enforcer to make sure that the passwords that they're using to create their accounts are actually strong enough. So according to the breach tracking service Constellar Intelligence, the passwords included in the source code archive are identical to credentials exposed in previous data breaches that involved email accounts belonging to the NPD's founder. And yes, the NPD does have a founder. His name is Salvatore Salvadini, a former actor, apparently, and also a retired sheriff deputy in Florida. So, Krypton Security reached out to Mr. Verini via email, and he said that the exposed archive, the .zip file containing the recordscheck.net credentials, had been removed from the company's website, and that the site is slated to cease operations in the next week or so. You can imagine one fatal data breach has led to the closure of this particular platform. So regarding the zip, it's been removed, but was an old version of the site with no working code and passwords, Mr. Verini told Krypton Security. And he also said that regarding your question, it's an active investigation, yada, 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 yada. And that's pretty much it. So the thing is, if you're watching this video and you live in America, or you've ever had a social security number from America, there is a possibility that you may have been impacted. So there have been several platforms that have been set up to allow users to check whether or not their credentials are at risk. And one that I found is from the npd.pentester.com. Basically, all you need to do is to provide your first name, last name, select the state in which you lived in the United States, or where you got your social security number, and then provide your birth year, and then you can simply search. This would allow you to check whether or not you've been compromised. And people are also saying that one of the best things you can do if you feel you've been affected is to put a freeze on your credit files. So if you're taking any kind of credit from the bank or things like that, you should definitely freeze that information, because the social security numbers and other information that has been exposed can be used by fraudsters, not just for identity theft, but they can also use to get loans from banks using your personal information. So it says right here that the best advice for those concerned about this breach is to freeze one's credit file at each of the major consumer reporting bureaus. Having a freeze on your files will make it much harder for identity thieves to create new accounts in your name, and it limits who can view your credit information. So very, very crazy stuff happening in the world of cybersecurity. And once again, you have a massive data breach that occurred simply because somebody or a group of people did not do the basics. How on earth do you store passwords in plain text? And how on earth would you have a website or a platform as important as recordscheck.net just providing a temporary password, the same temporary password to all their users, and not actually making sure that the users actually change that password into something more powerful? It's quite disgraceful, to be honest. These kinds of data breaches should not be occurring, but that's pretty much the kind of world we live in today. So that's it for the update to the NPD data breach. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, of course, I'd love to hear from you. You can put your comments down in the comment section below, and I'll answer them as soon as I can. If you're new here to the channel, welcome to Lab Cyber. My name is Alex. I cover information around the world of cybersecurity. So if you like this kind of information or content, be sure to like, subscribe, and of course, hit the bell so that you're notified whenever I upload a new video. Stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you next time. Cheers.